Now, in today's episode, we're talking about debt management and loans. How do we break that cycle? First of all, the reasons why we get into debt are normally one of these three. One, we have an income problem. The money that we earn is not enough for our basic needs. In terms of, these things are very important because the first time that we borrowed money, you guys, the money compounded. I never paid the loan. I can pay a loan. And then you lose resources of income. And then you're like, then you stop paying and the loan increases. So you end up paying much more than you borrowed. Now, I thought I would share with you some of the things I wish I had asked before, but I did not even know to ask them. Now, this is what I was saying. One, hi, welcome to the channel. I'm Gabriela, and this is the Personal Finance and Coffee Podcast. And here we talk about how to manage the money that we make. Fine, we make the money, we all want to make more money. But how do we manage that money so that we can do something with it, attain the goals that we want? So that 5 years later, 10 years later, we don't feel like I made the money, but where did it go? That's what we talk about on this channel. If you find this interesting, please like, please subscribe, so that you don't miss upcoming episodes. Now, in today's episode, we're talking about debt management and loans. How do we break that cycle? Why are we getting into debt? They're generally, I'm saying generally, please bear in mind, guys, please bear in mind that I am not a financial advisor. What I'm sharing with you is what I have learned from my experience, as well as the ideas and the thought process around debt. So, that I've put the disclaimer there. So first of all, the general places, the reasons why we get into debt are normally one of these three. One, we have an income problem. The money that we earn is not enough for our basic needs. In terms of, as in the most basic needs, food, shelter, we just don't earn enough. So you find that you have to borrow money in order to finance these basic needs. The second problem that leads us into borrowing money is a spending problem, where you're living beyond your means. Not living beyond your means for basic needs, but in terms of extra things that we are able to justify as a luxury, as a need, but we can actually live without. Like new clothes, going for an event with friends, updating your phone. Those are, that if you get into debt for such reasons, that is living beyond your means. And that's another reason why you probably get into debt. Now, the third, borrowing money for an investment, borrowing money to start a business, borrowing money to buy land. That is a third reason why you're borrowing money to invest generally, and either in business or buying an asset. That is the third reason. Then the fourth reason that we could probably get into debt is when we have emergencies that we are not prepared for, like dire emergencies, medical emergencies. I cannot say one is good, one is bad, because it comes down to context. But for specifically when it comes to living beyond your means, I personally think that is one that now that comes to managing our ego and managing how we think other people will see us. Because sometimes you make a decision to attend a social event because you're like, but what do people think when it comes to borrowing money for business? If you borrow money to start a new business, I don't think that will be wise. Personal opinion, because you don't know what will happen. It's better if you start with the capital you have and test the theory, and then if it works, you borrow money to grow, but not to start. How do you avoid getting into some of this debt? For the first one, you just don't earn more money. The answer is simple but not easy. Finding ways to earn more. Now, the reason why I don't talk about finding ways to earn more is because I don't feel very qualified to tell you, do this business, this is how you can make more money. There are so many ways to make more money. And the strange thing is that two people can start the same business and one works and one doesn't. So there are so many other dynamics that come with making more money. But when it comes to the first reason, you basically need to earn more money to stop that. The second reason of getting into debt, how to manage that. Now there, it's becoming humble. If you don't have the money for it, just be humble. That is what I can say when it comes to living without your means. Because you find that you have the money, but the money just goes. And then you feel like, I've not saved, I've not bought what? Not because you're not earning, but because the money you're earning, you're living beyond it. So you're constantly borrowing to sustain your lifestyle. And then the final thing is when it comes to emergencies, it's always helpful to build an emergency fund. I've made an episode about it. And you can't just wake up and have a large sum of money unless you've made a deal. If you've made a deal, by all means get the money and make it an emergency fund. But if you don't, you slowly build up that emergency fund. And you build it by living within your means. We know why we get into, we've talked about the reasons why we generally get into loans. And then we know the places where we borrow the money from. If you've decided that, okay, fine, my problem, I really need money, and this is where I'm going to get it from. There are some things that it's important that you know before you ask the person you're getting the money from, be it a bank, be it a circle, wherever you're borrowing the money. These things are very important because the first time that we borrowed money, you guys, the money compounded. I ever paid a loan, and you pay a loan, and then you lose your sources of income, and then you're like, then you stop paying, and then the money grows, the loan increases. So you end up paying much more than you borrowed. Now, I thought I would share with you some of the things I wish I had asked before that I did not even know to ask them. Now, this is what I would say. One, the interest rate they are giving you, sometimes they will tell you a percentage. You need to know, are they saying it per month or is it per year? Because the money lenders, or the money lenders, the money lenders, they tell you 2% per month. When you do 2 times 24, it's 24%. I'm just giving an example. The banks will tell you 23%, or they'll tell you 18%. Their 23% is per year. So understand clearly what the duration is. It seems obvious, but I just wanted to state that. The second thing that is important to ask is, in the event that I am not able to pay, perhaps I have personal challenges in terms of my income streams, what are your penalties? They need to tell you what the penalties are so that you know what missing a payment means. Because sometimes you're like, you need the money and then you're sure you're going to pay. Nothing is going to go wrong. But it helps to know in advance, nothing may go wrong and you may be able to pay and finish. But in the event that you're not able to, knowing what that penalty is helpful. Why is it helpful? Because when you miss, for example, if you've borrowed 1 million, and then every month you're supposed to pay maybe 100,000. I'm giving examples. But then they say that if in 1 month you don't pay 100,000, we're going to charge you maybe another 100. Do you know what happens? They're going to get the 100 that you didn't pay, they add it to the 1 million. So it becomes 1.1. Then they will add the penalty, so it becomes 1.2. Now the interest for the next time is now not on the 1 million you borrowed. No, the interest is going to be on the 1.2. So the money just keeps increasing. So that is why it's important to ask in advance how much the penalty is. And if you still want to take it, it also gives you an opportunity to see if you can negotiate the penalty depending on where the money is coming from. Now, that's the next thing. The other thing that is important is the money on reducing balance or not. What do I mean by reducing balance? When you borrow 1 million, and then you're supposed to pay 100,000. So if in the first month you've paid 100,000, and now the balance is 900,000, you need to ask them, when they are calculating that interest, do they calculate interest now on the 900 that is the new balance, or is the interest constantly on the 1 million? Not everyone does it the same way. Because sometimes you find in circles, it's on a reducing balance. And then you find in the bank, the interest is constant on the amount that you've borrowed, regardless of the new balance that you've paid. You get what I mean? So that is something else that you need to know, because it will help you know, it gives you even know how it's going to calculate, and also to make a comparison. So you start to compare, should I take this option or this option? So those are points to make comparison on. Now the next thing that I think is important to ask is, when you look at for example, you know how you borrow money, and then a few months later you get a lump sum of money. You can maybe make a deal, business goes well, or you get a lump sum of money, and you're like, now I want to pay back my loan before. For example, if the loan was 6 months, but now in the 4th month you have the money to pay it all back. You need to ask before you get the money, if I get this money before the 6 months, can I pay it back without any extra cost? Like, you pay it back. Because especially find that if they're calculating like 2% every month, or 3%, or 5% every month, Now, if the agreement was for 6 months, but then you get the money in 4 months, that means they're not going to get interest for these months. You're going to pay them all their money plus interest for those months that you had the money. Now you need to ask them, will they charge you any extra? Will they charge you any extra money for bringing money as a lump sum? And how much will it be? Because sometimes in the banks, that is what they do. You get what I mean? Now, these are general ideas because everyone does things differently. I'm just giving you ideas of some questions you should ask before taking. The other thing that I think you need to ask is that in the event that I am unable to pay within that 6-month period that you agreed on, what are the requirements or what are the conditions if we're to extend the time for the loan period and recalculate how much you should pay monthly? That's also important to know. One, if they accept that, and what are the conditions before you get the money, because you're able to make a decision with all the information on your plate. Because sometimes when we borrow money and we're in a rush and we're in a need, we don't ask all these questions. But ask these questions. Just make a checklist of this. I want to ask this, I want to ask this, I want to ask this. Then you ask from the bank, you ask from the circle, and then you compare which one is better in terms of these conditions. Now, the next thing that you need to ask is what are your minimum monthly payments? Because when you borrow money and then they make a breakdown, if the interest, they will have, when you pay 100,000, sometimes you find maybe like 60,000 is going to the interest and then 40,000 is going to the principal amount. I'm giving an example. So you need to, when you look at that breakdown, you need to know your monthly amount. Now, that amount that you're supposed to pay minimum every month, can you afford to get that money every month? Because if you make that commitment and then you're not able, when you make that commitment and then you're not able to see it through, that is when the loan compounds and it increases. So you end up paying times 3, times 4 the money. Now, so we've talked about one, reasons why we borrow the money. We've talked about where we borrow the money. And then we've talked about some questions to ask the places we're borrowing the money. Now, the next is, I would like to talk about, is questions that we need to ask ourselves. Now, this is behind closed doors. You've got all your questions answered, and you're like, now, should I take the money? These are things to consider. One, when you look at your income, can you actually pay that money? Because if you're not able to, this will become a nightmare. Two, do you actually have to take this money? Because sometimes you find that because you have access, you know how they send you messages, hey, and you can now borrow this much. You know how you guys, they market loans. It's like, I give you free money, salary loan. Do you really need that money? Because it may be there, but do you actually have to take it? And if you feel like you don't have to take it, then don't. Only take it when you absolutely must. The other thing that you need to ask yourself when it comes to absolutely taking the money, when you look at the reason why you're getting this money, it's sometimes, are you in an emotional state? Because you know when you're hiked and you're told there's a deal, our vision is blurred. We're only looking at what could happen. We're not looking at what if this goes wrong. You may be feeling like you're being optimistic, but looking at both sides is helpful to make a decision. Now, the other thing, the final thing I would like to talk about is the question of, now, Gabi, all these things I didn't know, I took the money, now what do I do? How do I pay it back? How do I break out of this cycle? Now, I'm going to give you some ideas that I have. The first one is, there are two methods of paying back money. There's one that they call the avalanche, and there's one they call the snowball. The difference is, for one, you list all your loans, but you list them from the amount, the lowest amount to the highest amount. And then you start paying back, This is the snowball method. Then you start paying back from the list. So if you borrowed money from a friend, and it's like maybe 200,000, and then you borrowed money from a circle, maybe it's $1 million, and then you borrowed money from the bank, and so you pay back based on the lowest amount. So every time up, but when you're paying back from the lowest amount, you always have to pay the monthly for all the loans. And then any extra money you make, you put it to the smallest so that it goes. And then the minimum monthly for that one, you move to the next. Then the other one is the avalanche method. Here you list your loans, but you list them in order of interest. The highest interest, move it from the highest to the lowest interest. The concept here is that when you pay off the highest interest, you've saved on the money you're spending on interest. Now the concept with the snowball is that you get motivation. You're like, oh, I've cleared the first one. Let me go. Let me keep going. It gives you that energy to keep going when it comes to the others. That is now the other forms of so that is how you pay it back. Now getting started, my dears, it goes back to making a budget. Because first of all, you need to make more money when you're in such a situation. But even the money that you're already making, you need to plan for it. Because you need to know that you can eat, you can sleep, you can pay your rent, you need to know the bare minimum. Most times, the barrier that we feel towards making this breakdown of making a budget is the resistance comes from knowing that the money I make is already not enough to cover these bills. So why should I? It's stressful to think about looking at the picture. But then somehow the month goes by, you're like, I've survived this way. But keep in mind that you're surviving like that, but throughout the month, you have a lot of anxiety. That's that stress of not knowing, where, now what? Tomorrow, now what? But when you lay it out, over time, fine, you will look at it and you'll be stressed, and then you'll be forced to make decisions. Forced to make decisions to live within your means. If you've been having plot, it reduces. And now those are decisions that we don't want to make. So instead of making the decisions, we choose to not look at making the budget. But if you don't make the budget, then you find that you're constantly under stress, and then you keep the lifestyle, and so you keep borrowing money, and you keep within the cycle. So the bottom line is, to jump out of this, you need to earn more money, but you need to sit down and live within your means. It's uncomfortable. But keep in mind that this is not forever. It's a season. Once you're done, not that you will go back to living that lifestyle, but those difficult conversations that we don't want to make, for your friends to call you for something and you say, no, I cannot make it, because you're trying to pay back your debts, is uncomfortable and it is difficult. But it is worth taking, because the peace of mind that comes on the other side of knowing that no one demands you money, and you're actually now able to start building your investments. You're now able to start investing in unit trust and investing in bonds and saving up money to start your business. Being able to do that without that weight, it takes a while, I will not lie. There is no shortcut. Unless you make a deal and you get a lump sum and clear all your debts. But the other challenge with that is that you still have to go through the process of learning the discipline to be content and to pursue this journey. But it is worth it. Please ask the question, and I always respond to my comments, and I look forward to it. I have a community, and you can join the community. So I have 2 tiers. On the first tier, the first tier is 6,000 per month, and the second is 10,000 per month. What do you get from these? 1, you get a community where we are able to have accountability. Accountability where in the first tier, when I make a video, you get the video before other people get it, 24 hours before everyone else. And then in the second tier, when I have a live video, and we're talking about, for example, if we're talking about debt, if you have a question in that moment, I can answer it. Other people in the community can answer it. Because when you start this money journey, and you feel like, I know what to do, but I'm not doing, and you're like, what is wrong? Or you start the journey, but everyone around you is really not into it. For them, they're living their lives. The friction comes in. So that is the purpose of this community. Plus, thirdly, it does support me on this journey, on the content creation. So if you find anything I've said valuable, please join the community. The first tier or the second tier, either of them is very welcome. For those who have joined, thank you so much. I am so grateful. Yeah, that's it for today. I hope you found value in today's episode. Please, if you have any, I'm sure there are so many things I've not talked about. Please leave your comments. Any advice you give to people who are taking loans, things that I have not mentioned, those comments are very helpful. I also find them very helpful. And guys, I appreciate everyone who comments. Your feedback is helpful. Your lessons are helpful. I'm learning from you as well, because I've not arrived. I'm on the journey as well. I just share what I've learned along the way. Please share what you've learned as well. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.